This is my 3-part pool care system that I've developed over the last 30 years. It's helped millions of pool owners keep their pools clean and clear without overspending on unnecessary chemicals. I'm Matt Giovanisci, the founder of Swim University, and this is literally everything that you need to know about pool care. It works for every type of pool, including in-ground, above ground, inflatable, temporary, and quickset. And it applies to chemistry systems like chlorine, saltwater, minerals, UV, and ozone. Before we get into how to take care of your pool, you need to know a few things about your specific setup. This is the stuff that matters because the wrong chemical dose or the wrong cleaning approach can cause actual damage to your pool. So let's walk through it. What are your walls and floors made of? Is it vinyl, is it plaster, concrete, or fiberglass? The material affects both your water chemistry and how you clean the surfaces. Now here's a simple way to figure it out. Just reach in and feel it. Plastic with visible seams and patterns? That's probably a vinyl liner. Smooth and hard with no seams? Fiberglass. Rough like rock or cement? Plaster, pebble, or quartz. Smooth but leaves a chalky residue on your hand? That's painted concrete. The second thing you need to know is how many gallons does your pool hold? You'll need this number to calculate your chemical dosing and how long to run your pump. If you're not sure, there's a volume calculator linked below that you can use. Number 3, what kind of pump or pumps does your pool have? Your pump is what pulls the water out of the pool through your filter system and then back into the pool. So you'll want to know the make and the model and whether it's a single speed, a dual speed, or a variable speed pump. And this affects how long you run it each day. So you want to look for the label on the pump housing. If it's missing or it's worn off because it's older, check the part numbers on the lid or the basket. Now some pools have a secondary pump, usually dedicated to an automatic pool cleaner or a fountain or a waterfall or a slide. Now if you have one of these, make note of what it does and its make and model. You'll want to know when it should be running and when it shouldn't. Number 4, what kind of filter do you have? There are 3 types of pool filters: sand, cartridge, and DE, which stands for diatomaceous earth. Now the sand filter is the easiest to spot because it's a big round bulbous tank and it's heavy because it's full of sand. But it also has a multi-port valve on top or off to the side with settings like filter, backwash, waste, and rinse. Now a cartridge filter and a DE filter, they look pretty similar from the outside, so you may need to open them up if you don't have any sort of markings on the outside of them. Inside a cartridge filter, you're going to see 1 or more cylindrical cartridges, looks like an air filter. A DE filter has a grid or a finger system that's coated in a white powder. This is diatomaceous earth. Now, in terms of ease of use, sand is the easiest, cartridge is in the middle, and DE is the most involved, but it filters the best. Now, if you're shopping for a new filter, I just recommend going with a cartridge filter because it's a solid all-around choice. 5. What else is treating your water? Now, as the water passes through your filter, it might run through additional equipment before it returns to your pool. These are things like a chlorinator, a salt system, an ozonator, a UV system, a mineral system, or a heater. And what you have here directly affects how much chemistry you need to add manually. So you want to look for equipment connected to your plumbing between your filter and your return jets. So these are what make up your basic pool profile. I recommend writing them down somewhere because you're going to need them when it comes to maintenance and troubleshooting. Now, if you have an in-ground pool, you'll also need to know where all of your plumbing goes to and from. Don't worry, we've got a full video on how to map out your pipes and your pool valves if you need more help with that. Now that we understand the basic pieces of your pool, it's time to take care of it. We're going to get through all 3 C's of pool care: circulation, cleaning, and chemistry. Let's start with circulation. Good circulation is like having a strong, healthy heart. Water needs to move out of your pool, through your filtration system, and then back in again continuously. So if anything slows that down, you end up with stagnant water, and stagnant water means cloudy water and algae. Now, once you get your circulation dialed in, the goal is just to maintain it. I'm going to walk you through each part of your pool that impacts circulation, from your skimmers all the way to your return jets, and how to make sure each one's doing its job. Now, this is honestly one of the most important parts of this system. That's why it's first, circulation. So if you want a handheld version of all of this and a complete roadmap of your pool's plumbing and equipment, it's all here in the Pool Care Handbook. Actually, everything in this video is in this book and more. So if you want an easy to use reference guide, you can check it out using one of the links below, or you can go to swimu.com/book. All right, the first thing is skimmers. Skimmers are those rectangular openings in your pool where the water exits and then enters your filtration system. If you have an above ground pool, you just have one. In-ground pools usually have more than just one. Now, each skimmer has a basket inside, and that basket catches large debris before it reaches your pump. You want to check and empty those baskets at least once a week. After a big windstorm, you can check them sooner. Now, if you're dealing with fine debris like pollen or dust on top of your pool, you can use a skimmer sock. It's just a tiny sock that goes over your basket that'll catch that fine debris. And then if you add one of those, just make sure that you check it every other day or so it doesn't start restricting that water flow. Also, you want to make sure that your water level is at least halfway up the skimmer opening, because if it drops below that, your pump's going to start sucking in air, and that's going to kill your circulation. Number 2 is main drains. Now, if you have an in-ground pool, you also have a main drain at the bottom. Now, some pools will have 2 of them, and that's intentional because 2 drains spreads out the suction so it's not dangerously strong in one spot, and that's a safety feature. I'm sure you've heard horror stories. Now, water should always be flowing through your main drains. If something seems off, make sure there's no debris blocking them. Number 3 is your suction side lines. These are the plumbing lines that carry the water from your skimmers and your main drains to your pump. Now, all of the valves along those lines need to be fully open so that water flows freely. And you can check out our other video on pool valves if you're not sure which each valve does. Now, if you think you have a clog, you can start checking the skimmer basket because that's the most common cause. All right, number 4 is the pump. Now, the pump pulls the water from the pool and pushes it through your filter system. Every pump has a clear lid so that you can see inside. And inside the pump housing, there's a pump basket, and it catches anything that has made it past your skimmer basket. Now, this you want to check once a week when you check your skimmer baskets. You can usually just see right through the lid without even opening it. Now, while you're looking in there, you can watch for air bubbles because air trapped in the system can cause weak flow and can eventually overheat and damage your pump and motor. So let's talk about troubleshooting pump water flow. Now, you want to check the pump lid O-ring for cracks or dryness, because a bad seal is going to let air in. So you want to keep it lubed with a silicone-based lubricant specifically for pool pumps, not using petroleum jelly, which is basically Vaseline, and replace it, the O-ring, just replace it if it's completely worn out. Also, check the unions and the connection points between the pump and your plumbing, because loose connections are another air entry point. If you have any parts of your pool that have thread and you have threaded parts, you can add plumber's tape to those threads if anything feels loose. That'll help tighten it up. Now, if your pump is struggling with flow after backwashing or opening the pool for the season, it probably just needs to be primed. You can just turn it off, remove the lid, fill the housing with a garden hose for a couple of minutes. You replace the lid, turn the pump back on, and watch the housing fill with water. It might sputter at first. That's normal. Just give it a couple of tries if it doesn't catch. Now, how long should you run your pump? Your pump needs to pull all of the water in your pool through your filter system at least once a day. That's called your turnover rate. A typical runtime is usually between 8 to 10 hours per day. If it's really hot out, I recommend running it longer because heat speeds up algae growth and burns through chlorine faster. Now, if you have a variable speed pump, you want to run it longer but at lower speeds. At least 12 hours a day is usually typical. Or you could split it up. You could run a few hours on high for chemical circulation and skimming, and then the rest on low speed for just basic filtration. The low speed draws so little electricity that it's often more efficient to just let it run around the clock. That's 24/7. Just make sure that it's running fast enough to trigger your saltwater generator if you have one, or your heater's flow sensors. Timing matters too. You want to run your pump when the sun is the strongest. That's when algae grows the fastest and UV rays hit your chlorine the hardest. So if you can, avoid running during peak electricity hours, which is usually in the early evenings if you want to save on your electric bill. Now, if you notice cloudy water, weak return jets, algae starting to appear, or your chemical levels won't hold, those are usually signs that you're not running your pump long enough. So try adding 2 to 4 more hours and see if it helps clear things up. Number 5, the filter. Water leaves the pump and goes into the filter. Now, the filter's job is to catch everything that the pump pulls in. But as it does its job, it gets dirty. And a dirty filter means restricted flow and poor circulation. So, when do you clean your filter? Well, every filter has a pressure gauge. And when your filter is freshly cleaned and everything's running normally, you check that gauge, write down the number, because that's your baseline pressure. Now, as the filter starts to collect debris, the pressure inside the tank will start to rise. And when that pressure climbs 8 to 10 psi above your baseline, well, then it's time to clean your filter. If your baseline is like 10 psi, you want to clean it when it hits 20 psi. If your pressure gauge is at 0 and everything's running, well, it's probably just broken. You just replace it. It's cheap. It's easy to swap out because otherwise you're flying blind if you don't have a working one. Another sign that it's time to clean your filter is that the water flow out of your turn jet is simply weak, or you've got constant cloudy water. You'll also want to clean your filter if you're trying to clear up algae with shock and you're running it 24/7. We'll talk more about algae and shocking your pool later. Okay, sand filter cleaning. Sand filters are cleaned by backwashing. This means that you're reversing the flow of water inside the filter to dislodge any contaminants in the sand. And dirty water will exit the pool through the waste port. To backwash your sand filter, first turn off the pump. Then you can turn your multi-port valve clockwise to the backwash position. Attach a backwash hose to the waste port so that the dirty water drains away from your pool, and then you can turn your pump back on. You want to watch the sight glass on the valve. This is that small glass window that you see. It'll run cloudy at first while it's clearing out all the debris, and once it runs clear, or you can see it clear out of your backwash hose, shut off the pump. Then you can turn your valve to rinse, and you want to run your pump for about a minute to reset that sand bed inside the tank. Then turn off the pump, switch it back to filter, turn on the pump, and you're done. Now, once a year, you can add a sand filter cleaner to your filter to get the sand extra clean. And then just plan to replace the sand entirely every 3 to 5 years. Now, if you want an in-depth walkthrough on this, check out our backwashing video. Cartridge filter cleaning. Now, cartridge filters require more hands-on cleaning. You turn off the pump, close the ball valve between your pool and your pump, and bleed the air pressure from the tank first using the air bleeder valve. This is very important. Then you can unclamp the filter lid, pull out the cartridges, and hose them down with a spray nozzle on your garden hose. You want to spray into the pleats until they go from like dirty gray color to as close to white as possible. Then you can reassemble everything, replace the filter top back on, close the clamps, and then turn the system back on, open the air relief valve to release any excess air in the system, and then keep the valve open until a steady stream of water sprays from it, and then you're done. Now for deeper cartridge cleaning, you can spray with a filter cleaner, let it soak for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then rinse it off thoroughly with water. And if your cartridge is damaged, if it's ripped, torn, or it's just too dirty, just replace it. Now they should last about 3 to 5 years, but pools with heavy use or they're tiny and cheap cartridges, you may need to replace them once a year. DE filter cleaning. Now DE filters are the most powerful filters that you can put on a pool, but it takes more upkeep, more maintenance than sand or cartridge filters. Now there are 2 things that you need to do. You backwash it monthly or when the PSI is above 10 PSI above normal pressure, and you deep clean it once or twice a season. So here's how to backwash a DE filter. First, you turn off the pump. Connect your backwash hose to the waste port, set your multi-port valve to backwash or pull up the plunger if you have a push-pull valve, and then you can turn your pump back on. You let it run for about a minute or 2 or until the water coming out of your hose is running clear. Then you can turn off your system. If you have a multi-port valve, you can set the valve to rinse and run the pump for about 30 seconds. And you can skip this step if you have a push-pull valve. Now it's time to recharge it with fresh DE. You want to mix your DE powder with pool water in a bucket until the consistency is like turkey gravy. Now the amount of DE to add depends on your filter size. So you want to check the square footage on your filter tank, or if you have a manual, or you just take a picture of it and search for a similar one online. Now for a deep clean, you want to add about 1 pound per 10 square foot. After a backwash, you only need 80% of that since you didn't fully flush all the DE out. And a little safety tip, always wear a mask when you're handling DE powder. Now with the pump running on the filter setting, you want to remove the pump basket and pour that slurry, that gravy DE slurry, into the closest skimmer to your filter, and then run it for at least 30 minutes until all that DE enters the filter. Now, here's how to deep clean a DE filter. Like I said, once or twice a season, you want to fully disassemble the filter and give it a deep clean. You want to turn off the pump, open the air release valve, very important, and remove the drain plug to drain the tank all of water, okay? Then you pull off the clamp, you remove the lid, and you take out the manifold and the grids all at one time. It's just big manifold with a bunch of grids inside. Or if you have a Hayward filter, you might have fingers, like little dangly fingers. Spray everything down with a garden hose first, but don't use a pressure washer, it's too powerful. Now, if your grids are stiff, you can soak it in a DE filter cleaner. And once a year, I would soak the entire manifold overnight in a 1 to 20 solution of muriatic acid to water. And when you do this, just wear gloves, wear goggles, and wear a mask, because we're dealing with acid here. Now you want to wipe down and lubricate all of the O-rings with a silicone-based lubricant. You don't want to use petroleum jelly, which is Vaseline. And you can reassemble, replace the drain plug, turn the pump back on, close the air release valve once all the water sprays out, and you can add a fresh dose of DE through the skimmer. And you want to add 100% of that dose because all of the DE will have been rinsed out. Number 6, the return jets. Now, proper return jet positioning helps to mix chemicals evenly and prevents dead zones where algae can grow. The return jets are where the filtered water comes back into your pool. And most jets will have an eyeball fitting. It's a small adjustable nozzle. And if yours don't, you can add one. They're cheap and they make a real difference, trust me. You want to aim the eyeball fittings angled down at about a 45-degree angle. Just make sure that all the return jets are pointing in the same direction, either clockwise or counterclockwise. Like you're trying to create a circular flow in the water. You're trying to create that whirlpool, right? Now, you probably won't actually see the water spin, but it helps to keep the water moving continuously towards your skimmer and your main drains rather than sitting in dead corners. Now, if your return jets feel stiff and they won't rotate easily, you could try just using a hammer, tap lightly on the edge of the eyeball, and it should start to move. You can also stick a medium-sized screwdriver inside the eyeball. You can gently twist it to just kind of loosen it up. Now, that's pool circulation in a nutshell. Skimmers flowing, pumps running, filters clean, jets are pointed in the right direction. Get these things working together and your pool will do a lot of the filtering on its own. Now let's talk about the second C in the 3 C's of pool care, and that's cleaning. Now there are 3 things that we do to clean a pool. We skim the surface, we brush the floors and the wall, and we vacuum. Simple as that. Now before we get into it, here's what you need on hand. A telescopic pole, so you want to look for one that extends from 8 feet to at least 16 feet. It's the same pole that you'll use for your net, your brush, and your vacuum head. Then you have a skimmer net and a leaf net. A flat net's going to work great for quick surface skims, and a leaf net holds more for bigger cleanup days. I recommend having both, but if you just have to pick one, pick the big leaf net. Then you have your pool brush. You want to look for one with nylon bristles for fiberglass pools, vinyl, and painted concrete. If you have an unpainted concrete pool or a gunite pool, I also recommend getting yourself a stainless steel brush. Then you have your vacuum head, your hose, and your skimmer plate or your vacuum plate. Now, a manual vacuum setup like this connects to your skimmer and uses your pump suction to vacuum the pool floor. Then you have automatic or robotic cleaners. Now, these are optional, but they're great for weekly maintenance. However, you're still going to need a manual vacuum for things like algae and cloudy water. Okay, number 1, skimming. Now, skimming or netting is when you take the net and sweep the surface of the pool to collect debris, pollen, leaves, twigs, and bugs. And you can do it as often as you can, the more the better. Now, every other day is the goal, but at a bare minimum, try to do it at least once a week. If you can keep the surface clean by skimming or netting, debris is not going to sink to the bottom where it's harder to remove, and you're giving your filter less work to do. You can think of it as a quick meditative ritual. Just grab a cold drink, put on a podcast, and just sit out there and skim the pool. And then when you're done, jump in. And when you're netting the pool, I recommend using a technique called the cast and reel. All right, this is when you take the net, right, and you cast it out into the pool, and you have it flip over, and then you pull it toward you to collect the debris as you walk around the pool. It just helps on your back, and it's just a little bit easier than trying to push it with your hands, okay? Now, if you want extra help skimming away debris, there are 2 types of automatic skimmers worth knowing about. Those are mounted skimmers, which run off your pump's return pressure, and then there's robotic skimmers, which run on batteries or solar power, and you don't need your pump running. Now, neither of these replaces hand skimming, but they help keep things tidy in between. Number 2 is brushing. Now, even if you skim every day, stuff is still going to cling to the walls and settle into crevices on the bottom of your pool, especially in concrete or gunite pools. So you want to brush once a week at minimum. Now, brush every surface. That includes the floor, the walls, behind ladders, corners, and your stairs if you have them. And make sure that you get all of the nooks and crannies, all of the crevices. These are low flow, or what we call dead zones, and it's where algae spores love to hide. Brushing loosens contaminants off your surfaces and into the water, where your chlorine can kill them and your filter can actually capture them. Now, if you've already got a full-blown algae problem, brushing alone is not going to fix it, but it's always the first step to getting the algae spores off the wall. Number 3 is vacuuming. Now, vacuuming removes the dirt and smaller debris that settle on the bottom of the floor. The stuff skimming and brushing will stir up, but won't fully eliminate, or what your filter can't pick up. So you want to plan to vacuum at least once a week. Now, when it comes to manual vacuuming, you've got 2 filter settings that are important to know about: the filter and the waste setting. Now, for regular manual vacuuming, you're just going to use your regular filter setting. This is what you use all of the time. This means that as you vacuum, the water is going to pass through your filter just like normal. But if you're vacuuming up algae, cloudy water, or you use a flocculant and all that cloudy or algae water sinks to the bottom and you're filtering out a lot of that, I would switch the filter to waste so that that dirty water bypasses your filter and exits through the backwash hose. Otherwise, it's just going to come right back into your pool. Now, if you have a cartridge filter with no waste setting, you can just remove the cartridge, open the drain at the bottom of the filter housing, and the water will exit there as you vacuum. I also recommend using a vacuum plate, or what's called a skim vac, when you're connecting your vacuum hose to your skimmer, because without it, the debris bypasses the basket in your skimmer and goes straight to your pump, which, if it doesn't catch there, could clog or damage your pump. Now, if you're not sure how to set up your manual vacuum, you can check out our other video all about how to vacuum your pool. Now, when it comes to automatic cleaners, there are 3 types. I mentioned robotic cleaners because they're my favorite. They plug into an outlet, they run independently of your filter, and they scrub your surfaces as they go. And they can also act like a second mini water filter when they run, and it's great for that added water circulation. You have pressure side cleaners, which connect to your return line and uses the water pressure to power the vacuum. And then finally, you have suction side cleaners, which attach to your skimmer and use your filter system to create suction. And there's a lot of risk of debris getting pulled into the filter, so I say stick to robotic cleaners. Suction side cleaners are basically just manual vacuum cleaners that run automatically, so they work the same way. Number 4 is additional cleaning. Now, beyond the weekly 3 I just mentioned, here's a quick rundown of what else needs to be cleaned and how often. You have your pool deck. You want to clean monthly by sweeping or pressure washing. For slippery or slimy buildup, you can use a pool deck cleaner or try sodium phosphate or TSP. Then you have pool accessories. I would clean these monthly. You just wipe down your ladders, your railings, your slides. You can use a soft towel with diluted white vinegar or a pool surface spray. Your filter, you clean it when the pressure is high or the flow is weak. We just talked about it in the circulation section, so if you need to rewind, go back through that. Then you have a heater, if you have one. You want to inspect this monthly for corrosion and clean it at the start and the end of the season. If you have a saltwater pool, you want to check your salt cell. Inspect this every 3 months. You want to clean off any calcium buildup. If you want more information about cleaning your salt cell, check out our saltwater pool maintenance video. That's cleaning, all right? Skim every other day, brush at least once a week, vacuum at least once a week, and do a deeper equipment clean at least every month. If you stay consistent, your filter and chemicals won't have to work nearly as hard. So that's cleaning and circulation. Now let's talk about the third C, and the one most pool owners stress out about: chemistry. It's not as complicated as it looks, and once you understand all of the types of chemicals you're working with and what each one actually does, it starts to make sense. Let's start with balancing. What does balancing your water actually look like each week? At a minimum, you're testing your water once a week and adjusting whatever is out of range. 3 levels fluctuate the most and need the most attention. That's alkalinity, pH, and chlorine. These make your water sanitary and comfortable to swim in. If you keep those 3 in check, you're going to be in good shape most of the time. Now, the other levels, like cyanuric acid and calcium hardness, don't need to be checked weekly, but you should check them at least once a month or whenever you add fresh water. We'll go into each of these in more detail, but that's a high-level snapshot of your weekly water chemistry. Now, how you balance them is another area I'll go into. Everything in pool chemistry is connected. One level affects another. So there's a specific order you balance them in, and we'll walk through that as we go through each group of the chemicals. All right, so first, let's talk about testing your water. Testing is how you know what to adjust, how much to add, and whether anything you did actually worked. You want to plan to test your water at least once a week, but more often if the pool is getting heavy use, if you've had a lot of rain, or you're dealing with a water issue like green water or cloudy water. When in doubt, just test it. Let's talk about your testing options. There are a few ways to test your pool water. The first way is test strips. These are the fastest and most affordable option. For weekly maintenance, they get the job done and give you a high-level snapshot of your water chemistry. They won't give you your lab-level precision, but they'll tell you if something is off and needs attention. Collect a sample of water from your pool, dip the test strip into the sample, wait about 15 seconds, and then you can compare the colors to the chart on the back of the bottle. Now, test kits are more precise. You collect a water sample, you add a few drops of reagent, and you read the color change against the chart. They take a little more effort, but if you're troubleshooting a problem and you want more accurate numbers, they're worth having on hand. And this is the type that I recommend. Then you have digital readers. They're the most accurate, and they're great if you have trouble reading colors. Of course, they're more expensive, but they remove all the guesswork from color matching. And then you have pool store testing, which can be useful when you open the pool or if you're dealing with a problem that you can't diagnose on your own. They can test for things like total dissolved solids and metals that home test kits often miss. I used to do these for a living at the pool store, but I always tell people to test on their own first. Let's talk about how to collect a good water sample. This matters more than you think. You want to find a spot at the edge of your pool away from your skimmer and away from your return jets. You can hold your cup or container upside down, insert it elbow deep, and then flip it right side up to collect the sample. This gives you the most representative read of your actual water and not a localized concentration near your equipment. So what are you testing for? Well, a standard test strip will cover the essentials. That's free chlorine, total chlorine, pH, total alkalinity, calcium hardness, and cyanuric acid. Your free and total chlorine should be as close to each other as possible. And the gap in between them is what's called your combined chlorine, or the chlorine that's been used up by the water. We'll talk about that in the sanitizer section. Now remember, not every level needs to be adjusted weekly. You want to focus on alkalinity, pH, and chlorine every week. You can check your CYA or your calcium hardness monthly, or when you suspect something's off. The types of chemicals and what they do. You can think of your pool chemicals in 4 groups. You have your balancers, sanitizers, shock, and protectors. Now there's a 5th group, enhancers, for when you need a little extra help. We'll go through each of these groups so that you get a good idea of what they do. All right. Group number 1 is balancers. Balancers prep your water so everything else can work. If your water isn't balanced, your sanitizer is not going to work as well, your equipment can corrode, and swimmers will actually feel it. That's burning eyes, itchy skin, things like that. Balanced water is the foundation. Now, the 2 balancing chemistry levels are pH and total alkalinity. pH measures how acidic or basic your water is on a scale from 0 to 14. Now, you want to keep the pH in your pool between 7.4 and 7.6. Now, below that, the water gets acidic. That's corrosive to your equipment and irritating to swimmers. Above that, your water becomes basic and your chlorine stops working as well, and you can get this scale buildup. Now, the problem with pH is that everything affects it. Rain, swimmers, even your equipment. It's very volatile. And that's where total alkalinity comes in. This helps keep your pH stable so it doesn't fluctuate with every little thing you add to your water. Your target range for this is between 80 and 120 parts per million. Now, when the alkalinity is in range, your pH will stay more stable. When it's low, your pH becomes unpredictable. This is why we always adjust alkalinity first, then pH. Now, to adjust your pH and total alkalinity, you've got 4 chemicals. First is being alkalinity increaser, or baking soda. Both of these have the same active ingredient. You can either see sodium bicarbonate or sodium hydrogen carbonate. These raise your alkalinity and they'll slightly raise your pH. Then you have pH increaser or soda ash. The active ingredient in both of these is sodium carbonate. Now, this will raise your pH without affecting your alkalinity as much. pH decreaser or dry acid lowers both the pH and the alkalinity. And then muriatic acid also lowers both. Dry acid, I think, is a little safer to handle, but lots of people prefer muriatic acid or already have it on hand for cleaning concrete. Group number 2, sanitizers. Your sanitizer is what actually kills the bacteria, the algae, and everything else swimmers don't want to think about. This is a non-negotiable, you have to have one. Now, the most common sanitizer is, of course, chlorine, and chlorine comes in 3 forms. You have tablets, which is trichlor, granules, which is dichlor, and liquid chlorine, which is sodium hypochlorite. Now, tablets are the most convenient option. You load them into an automatic chlorinator or a floating dispenser, and they dissolve slowly over time, releasing chlorine steadily into your pool. The downside is that they work slowly, and they can lower your pH and raise your cyanuric acid levels over time. Granules dissolve quickly, which makes them great for a fast chlorine boost. You just broadcast them directly over the pool surface or pre-dissolve them in a bucket of water first. Just don't dump them all in one spot, since concentrated granules can actually bleach a vinyl liner or irritate a fiberglass finish. Granules can also raise your cyanuric acid levels, but it's not as big of an issue as tablets. Liquid chlorine acts the fastest of all 3. You pour it directly into the water, and it gets to work almost immediately. It's unstabilized, meaning it does not contain CYA or cyanuric acid, so it burns off in the sun faster than tablets or granules, but it also won't contribute to CYA creep over time. Now, liquid chlorine is also less potent than the other types of chlorine, so it works well in smaller pools or for saltwater pool owners who need to boost their chlorine. The trade-off is that liquid chlorine has a shorter shelf life and is heavier to store and handle than the dry options. Now, a quick note on cyanuric acid, or CYA, like I mentioned before. This is the stabilizer that protects your chlorine from being burned off by the sun's UV rays. Think of it like, I don't know, sunscreen for chlorine. I'm going to cover it in more depth in the protector section, but just know that it's closely tied to the sanitizer that you use. Now, you can mix and match these based on your situation. Many pool owners will use tablets for day-to-day maintenance and switch to liquid chlorine if their pH or cyanuric acid levels are out of range. If you have a saltwater pool, you're not adding chlorine regularly, but you still have a chlorine pool. Your saltwater generator converts the salt in your water to chlorine, or hypochlorous acid. All you got to do is keep your salt level between 2,800 and 3,200 parts per million, and the system is going to make the chlorine for you. Now, there are other sanitizers out there like bromine, which is common in indoor pools and hot tubs. You have baguanine or Baquacil, that's a chlorine-free alternative. And then you have supplemental systems like minerals, UV, and ozone. But most backyard pools run on either chlorine or salt. Now, as for your target levels, in a chlorine pool, you want to keep your free chlorine between 1 and 3 parts per million. In a saltwater pool, the same target applies. Your generator is just doing the work of hitting that range for you, and you'll likely keep it around 3 parts per million and a bit heavier in higher use areas or higher use moments or high heat. Now, if you use a supplemental sanitizer like UV or minerals or ozone, you can run your chlorine a little lower, around 0.5 to 1 part per million, because those systems are handling most of the sanitizing load. And that's one of the benefits of adding a supplemental system. Less chlorine, same protection. Group number 3, shock. Now, shock isn't just a product, it's a process, and there are 2 types. You have non-chlorine shock, which is potassium monopersulfate, or MPS, and it's an oxidizer. It doesn't add chlorine to the water. What it does is break apart the used up chlorine, called combined chlorine or chloramines, and it frees your chlorine up to keep sanitizing. Now, this is great for weekly maintenance. After adding it to the water, you can swim again in about 15 minutes. Chlorine shock is your heavy-duty option. It adds a concentrated dose of unstabilized chlorine to your water to kill bacteria, to kill algae, or anything that's gotten out of control. I would use this after heavy pool usage, after a storm, or anytime you're dealing with algae or cloudy water. Now, you'll need to wait for your chlorine levels to come back down before you start swimming, usually overnight. Calcium hypochlorite, or Cal Hyposhock, is your most powerful option. But you can use dichlor shock, or you can even use liquid chlorine if you have a saltwater pool, fiberglass pool, or a smaller pool. We have a whole video covering all types of shock if you need more help deciding which one's right for you. Now, when you add chlorine shock to the pool, you want to always add it at night so that the sun doesn't burn it off too quickly before it has a chance to really do its job. And you want to keep the filter running until the chlorine comes back down to normal levels. Group number 4. These are the protectors. This group doesn't need weekly attention, but it protects your chlorine and your pool itself. The two chemistry measurements to pay attention to are cyanuric acid and total calcium hardness. Cyanuric acid, also known as CYA, also known as chlorine stabilizer. Now, without cyanuric acid in an outdoor pool, the sun's UV rays will destroy your chlorine. You can lose half of your chlorine in just about 17 minutes. CYA protects your chlorine from that. Your target range for a regular outdoor chlorine pool is between 30 and 50 parts per million. Now, indoor pools don't need this at all. If you have a saltwater pool, I would aim a little bit higher. You want to be between 60 and 80 parts per million. Your system is constantly producing chlorine, but you don't want that generator working all the time. So do you actually need to add CYA to your water? Well, if you use chlorine tablets, trichlor, or granules, dichlor, those already contain cyanuric acid, and it builds up over time as you sanitize, so you may not need to add any extra. But if you use liquid chlorine or you have a saltwater pool, your sanitizer contains no CYA, so you'll need to add chlorine stabilizer separately to protect your chlorine from the sun. One warning, CYA doesn't break down as quickly. It only really goes up. So if it gets too high, above 80 to 90 parts per million, your chlorine becomes less and less effective. And the only way to fix it is to partially drain and refill your pool with fresh water. This is something to keep an eye on, especially if you keep your pool open year-round. Calcium hardness increaser. Your total calcium hardness protects your pool's surfaces and equipment. Too low and the water gets aggressive. It'll start pulling calcium from your plaster, your grout, or equipment to balance itself out. Too high and you'll get scaling or deposits all over your pool. Now, target ranges vary by pool type. This is why it's important to know which type of pool you have. We said that at the beginning. So you want to be between 225 and 275 parts per million for concrete pools, 175 to 225 parts per million for vinyl and fiberglass pools. But for fiberglass pools, I would keep it on the lower end since high calcium can cause discoloration in the fiberglass shell. And while vinyl itself doesn't actually need calcium, low calcium is corrosive to metal parts like ladders and fittings. Now the good news is that calcium hardness is pretty stable. You typically only need to adjust it once per season when you open your pool. And to adjust your calcium hardness levels, you just add calcium hardness increaser. Now like cyanuric acid, or CYA, if it gets too high, you'll need to dilute your pool by partially draining it and refilling it with fresh water. And check your water source if this is a common problem for you. Hard water will mean your calcium hardness levels are high. Fill your pool with a hose filter, or if the water is really hard, I would recommend using a water softener. Or you can use a stain and scale preventer, which can prevent the calcium from settling on your surfaces if you're not able to get your calcium levels in range. Now, two more products worth knowing about, especially depending on your water source and your pool type. Your metal sequestration is for anyone filling their pool with well water or hard water that contain iron or copper. Those metals can react to your chlorine and cause staining on your pool surfaces. Rust color stains from iron and greenish stains from copper. A metal sequestrant works by binding those metal particles and keeping them suspended in the water so that your filter can eventually remove them rather than letting them settle and stain your pool. Now, if you have well water, I recommend adding a sequestrant before you add anything else to your pool. Stain and scale preventer is a similar idea, but it's focused mainly on calcium. Now, if your calcium hardness is on the higher end, this product keeps calcium from depositing on your pool walls, your floor, and your equipment as scale buildup. Now, it doesn't remove the calcium from the water, only diluting it with fresh water does that, but it does keep it from causing damage in the meantime. It's especially useful for fiberglass pool owners where high calcium can cause fading and discoloration over time. And then we have group number 5, which is enhancers. Now, enhancers are optional. If your water is balanced and sanitized, you may never need them, but they're good to know about. So we have clarifier. Clarifier clumps together tiny little particles your filter can't catch on its own, helping to clear cloudy water. It's slow acting, but it's simple to use. You just add it and you run the filter. Flocculant does something similar, but instead of sending those particles to your filter, it actually sinks them to your pool floor so you can vacuum them out later. Now, this is great for severe cloudiness, but it does require a lot more effort, and you need to be able to vacuum on a waste setting. Algicide is a preventative, not a cure. If your water is already turned green, you need chlorine shock, not algicide. But it can help prevent algae when you're going on vacation or you're not keeping up with your pool regularly. Enzymes break down oils and organic buildup so that your chlorine can work more efficiently. Now, if you're constantly fighting water quality issues, enzymes can actually help before you reach for any extra chemicals. Then we have phosphate removers. Now, phosphate removers remove the food that algae eats. That's phosphates. But if you've got your water circulating, your pool is clean, your water is balanced, and you've shocked your pool, well, then you shouldn't really have an algae problem. But if you're doing all of that and you're still fighting algae, well, a phosphate remover might be worth trying. Again, if you've got your balancers, your sanitizer, and your shock dialed in, you may not need any of these, but they're a bonus, not a requirement. Now, the order you add chemicals matters. If you add them in the wrong sequence, they can work against each other or not work at all. You want to always have your pump and filter running when you add chemicals, and I recommend at least waiting 30 minutes between each one so that each chemical has time to circulate and dissipate, and then retest before moving on. Now, some products like calcium hardness increaser and muriatic acid need an hour or more of circulation to evenly distribute. Since they're acids, you don't want any hot spots in the water. And you never, ever want to mix chemicals together outside the pool. Even residue left in a bucket can cause a dangerous reaction. So here's the order to follow. 1. Metals first if you need it. If you have well water or you suspect iron or copper in your water, you add a metal sequestrant before anything else. Metals can react with chlorine and stain your surfaces. Getting them in suspension first protects your pool and your other chemicals. Number 2 is adjust your total alkalinity. Get the alkalinity in range before touching your pH because alkalinity directly affects how stable your pH will be. You can raise it with an alkalinity increaser or baking soda, and you can lower it with a pH decreaser. Then number 3 is to adjust your pH. Once your alkalinity is stabled, dial in your pH if needed. This is critical before you add any sanitizer since chlorine works most effectively between 7.4 and 7.6. You can raise your pH with a pH increaser, and you can lower it with a pH decreaser or muriatic acid. Now, you can also raise your pH by aerating your water. So running a water feature, a fountain, or an aerator will raise your pH without impacting alkalinity. Number 4, adjust your chlorine. Now that your water is balanced, you want to add your sanitizer. If you're using tablets and a chlorinator, they'll take a few hours to bring your levels up. Granules or liquid chlorine work much faster. And if you have a saltwater system that you're just starting up, I recommend adding a dose of liquid chlorine to bring the chlorine levels up so that your salt system doesn't have to work as hard. Number 5, adjust cyanuric acid if you need to. Check your CYA levels and add chlorine stabilizer if you need to. If you're already using trichlor tablets or dichlor granules, you'll get CYA in the water whenever you add chlorine, but it's not going to add a ton of CYA, it's just going to keep it in range. Now, if you use liquid chlorine or salt water, you should add chlorine stabilizer. You probably need it. Number 6, adjust calcium hardness if needed. Add a calcium hardness increaser if your levels are too low. If it's too high, you'll need to partially drain and refill your pool with fresh water or use a stain and scale preventer. Avoid adding calcium hardness increaser on the same day that you add alkalinity or pH balancers because it can cause calcium to come out of solution, leading to cloudy water or scaling. You want to wait at least 24 hours between adding these chemicals to avoid this interaction. Number 7 is to add shock separately. Don't think of shock as part of your balancing sequence. It's a separate step. So if you have algae issues or cloudy water, use chlorine shock. And you want to balance your pH and your alkalinity before you shock so that the shock works better. And if you're using unstabilized chlorine shock, like calcium hypochlorite shock, you want to add it at night so the sun doesn't burn it off before it has a chance to work. Now, most chemicals come with dosing instructions on the package, but if you need extra help calculating dosing or you just want to be told what to add without doing the math on your own, check out the Pool Care app. All you have to do is enter your test results and it calculates the exact dose for your pool. No charts, no guesswork, no overshooting. It's a tool I wish I had when I first started taking care of pools. So 30 years later, I have it now. So that's chemistry. I know it's a lot to take in all at once, but remember, you don't have to do all of it every single week. Test your water, adjust your alkalinity, pH, and chlorine in that order, and add shock regularly. That's your weekly routine. Everything else is maintenance and troubleshooting. Okay, so those are the 3 C's of pool care. You keep your water circulating and filtering, you keep your surfaces clean, and you keep your water chemistry balanced. Now, this is what it looks like in action when you put it all together. So let's start with every week. You want to test your total alkalinity, your pH, and your free chlorine, and adjust in order. So you have your alkalinity first, then your pH, and then your chlorine, and I would wait 30 minutes between adding each chemical. You want to add these chemicals to balance your alkalinity, pH, and chlorine. So alkalinity target is between 80 and 120 parts per million, pH targets between 7.4 and 7.6, and free chlorine between 1 and 3 parts per million. Then you want to skim debris off the surface. You want to do this more often if you have more debris, like if you live around trees. Use a flat skimmer net for those quick skims if you have one. Otherwise, just use a leaf net for bigger debris and even smaller debris. I think leaf nets are much easier to use. Then you brush the walls, the steps, and any crevices, those hard to reach places. Nylon brush for vinyl and fiberglass pools, and stainless steel for concrete and gunite. Make sure that you get into every what we call dead zones. This is where water doesn't circulate as well. That's corners, that's behind ladders, underneath diving boards, stairs, things like that. Then you vacuum your pool floor. You can use a manual vacuum, or I recommend you use a robotic cleaner. Now, if you're going to do manual vacuuming and you have a lot of algae or debris, just make sure that you switch your filter to the waste setting instead of on filter, or otherwise it'll just blow back in. Then just check your water level. It should be halfway up the skimmer opening. Too low and your pump's going to suck in air. Go around and empty your skimmer baskets more often when you have heavy debris, after a huge storm, or if you're using a skimmer sock. And keep that pump running daily. You want to run it longer when the weather is really hot. Variable speed pumps run at least 12 hours, if not 24 hours, and run during peak sun hours when possible. All right, here's some things to do just as needed. You can clean your filter when the pressure gauge reads 10 psi above normal. Now for sand and DE, you just backwash. Now for cartridge filters, you remove the top, you remove the cartridge, you hose it down, or you can spray it with a filter cleaner and let it soak for 15 to 20 minutes. Also, clean your filter if your return jets are weak. You can add a non-chlorine shock, which is an oxidizer or NPS, to break up any combined chlorine if that happens. I also recommend using non-chlorine shock if you notice a chlorine smell, or if you have eye irritation when you're swimming, or after a bunch of people use your pool. It's safe to swim in about 15 minutes right after you add it. I would add chlorine shock if you need to treat green water, if your water is cloudy, or if you have a lot of usage, like a lot of people. And I recommend using Cal Hypo shock or liquid chlorine as shock. Make sure before you add shock to balance your pH and alkalinity. And add the shock at night so that the sun doesn't burn it off too quickly. And of course, run your filter system whenever you're adding shock. And just run it until the pool is clear. Now, once a month, you want to test your cyanuric acid or your CYA levels. You want to make sure that if you have a regular pool, the target is between 30 and 50 parts per million. If you have a saltwater pool, it should be between 60 and 80 parts per million. I recommend testing this monthly or whenever you add fresh water or whenever you get a ton of rain. CYA only goes up. So if it's above 80 to 90 parts per million, then I would do a partial drain and refill because that's your only fix. Then I would test for calcium hardness. All right. So if you have a concrete pool, that should be between 225 and 275 parts per million. For a vinyl or a fiberglass pool, that should be 175 to 225 parts per million. And I would test this monthly or whenever you add fresh water or whenever you get a ton of rain. Again, this is only when needed, but you should clean your pool deck. You can sweep the pool deck, very simple, or use a pressure washer. You can use a deck cleaner, or you can just use TSP for if you have slippery or slimy buildup on the deck, because that can be very dangerous. Then you want to clean your accessories. This includes ladders, railings, and slides. You want to wipe all these surfaces with diluted white vinegar, or you can use a pool surface spray. Then you can inspect your heater, if you're lucky enough to have one. You want to check for corrosion, buildup, and pipe leaks. And if you have a saltwater pool, inspect your salt cell. You want to look for calcium deposits. And if you see them, you want to clean this at least every 3 months. All right, now I would do this at least once a year or every pool season. You want to deep clean your filter. For a sand filter, you just add a filter cleaner, and I also recommend replacing your sand every 3 to 5 years. For a cartridge filter, you just soak your cartridge filter overnight in a cleaning solution. And for DE, you need to fully disassemble it and take the grids out and do an acid rinse once a year. Once a year, I would inspect your equipment fittings and lubricate all your O-rings. And when you lubricate your O-rings, look for a specific silicone-based lubricant, one that's built for pool O-rings. Do not use petroleum jelly, which is also known as Vaseline. If you have a cartridge filter, check that cartridge. If it's fraying, if it's damaged in any way, just replace the whole thing. Those cartridges inside the filter only last about 3 to 5 years if you take really good care of them. If you have a heavy use pool, like you have a lot of people using the pool and your filter system's running all the time, or you buy cheap cartridges, well, you may need to replace them every single year. And then like I mentioned before, replace the sand in your sand filter. I recommend doing it every 3 to 5 years, and you can replace it sooner if your water is constantly cloudy or your sand inside the filter is getting clumped or it's getting greasy. If you have well water or you have hard water, you can use a metal sequestrant. Now add this before you add anything else to your pool. It prevents iron and copper from staining your surfaces. If you want a copy of this exact pool maintenance plan, you can actually go print it out because I made one just for you for free. I know this was a lot. I appreciate you sticking with me. I hope, though, it was helpful. Everything that you just learned here is my way of doing things. And I've been doing this for 30 plus years. It's a long time. And I've helped millions of people do this. And I hope that this video helps you as well. That's it. I'll see you in the next video. Take care. And as always, happy swimming.